glad to be here back again. Like my first Biohacker Summit was 2 years ago in this exact venue, and that was like one of the best events that I've ever gone to. But I think this year is definitely better. So it's good to see improvements. And given that the topic or the theme of this conference is optimizing your entire day, then I wanted to give a presentation about how do you find this optimal rhythm for eating and fasting, etc. Because the topic of circadian rhythms and chronobiology is becoming pretty popular, and we now know that it's not only what you eat that matters, but when you do it as well, which is quite critical. So that's going to be the purpose of my speech, is to kind of give you this unified theory of optimal meal timing and fasting based on the research that we currently have. And Mahatma Gandhi got it right in some sense as well. So he has a quote: "Each night when I go to sleep, I die, and the next morning when I wake up, I am reborn." So this is a pretty good quote for describing these circadian rhythms and the day and night cycles of our environment, because it reflects not only in our inner physiology, but also the light and darkness as cues that happen on a daily basis. There's morning, there's night, there's life, there's death, and all these things, they're happening inside your cells, within your cells, inside every other organ, or in between these processes. So it's a really fascinating topic, and all these things are kind of interlinked with each other. And research has actually shown that, misalignment of these rhythms between your own body and your own biology, between the one of the environment, plays a pretty critical role in health, longevity, and any other physiological process. And misalignment is linked to many diseases and accelerated aging. And actually, in 2017, the circadian rhythms were awarded, or the discoveries about the circadian rhythms were awarded the Nobel Prize in Physiology or Medicine by these three men. And they identified the specific protein in fruit flies that regulates the circadian clocks of these animals. And by now we know that in humans, within all cells and within all organs are also individual circadian clocks that are connected with a master clock inside your brain. So there's the most important main regulator inside your brain's hippocampus, but there are also many other clocks inside your vital tissues and cells. So they're all kind of communicating with each other. And research has actually shown, that misalignment from these circadian rhythms and disruptions is linked to shortened lifespan in mammalian cells and other life organisms. So in this example, deviations from the free-running circadian clock in fruit flies is associated with shorter lifespan. So there's probably some correlation between human physiological functioning as well, although it's not very specific. And the problem is that as you get older, you inevitably will experience some mild disruption in your own circadian rhythms. And for example, younger people, they tend to exhibit a much more robust and much more resilient circadian pattern throughout the entire day. And they tend to be they tend to be healthier as a result of that as well. Whereas on the other hand, as you get older, these variations or these patterns, they become less robust and they become more stagnant. And older people tend to be more vulnerable to the circadian disruption, so to say. Their bodies are becoming less able to detect the cues that are coming from the environment. And this is just another sign of accelerated aging. And the kind of caveat to this is, or the challenge is, how do you maintain proper circadian rhythm throughout your entire lifetime, not only in your daily activities, but also like the meal timing and the food intake, so to say. Fortunately, there are a few ways of slowing down this process, as well as preventing the disruption from taking place. So for example, it's been shown that calorie restriction can reverse this negative side effect of aging, which is the disruption in circadian rhythms. And this particular study found that calorie restriction or dietary restriction, eating less calories, eating less food, it's able to reverse this aging process that is caused by circadian disruption. And this happens because calorie restriction is like a stressor on your body. It causes damage in some aspects, and it's harmful in small amounts, but it's a positive stressor. It's like a hormetic stressor that actually will yield benefits in the future. Your body adapts to it, and as a result, it's able to become more resilient and more robust against circadian disruption. And it also is mediated through the functioning of NAD metabolism. So NAD is one of the main enzymes that your body produces, and NAD produces energy as well. It's required for essentially all physiological processes, and low NAD levels tend to be correlated with aging, and if your body doesn't have enough energy, then nothing's going to work. And the idea of being able to still produce NAD thanks to calorie restriction, that's kind of one of the main mechanisms by which calorie restriction can reverse aging. And yeah, as I told you, NAD reduction happens as you get older. Older people have less NAD because they're not as youthful. Their body isn't able to produce enough of it, and it's like a vicious cycle as well. If you are already experiencing less NAD, you're already tired, then you don't have the energy to do anything about it as well. Versus if you're young, then you, at least even if you're tired, then you can still do something about it. But your body is still able to produce some NAD naturally. Versus as you get older, your body's NAD production tends to drop as well, so you become less effective at producing it. NAD metabolism is very much mediated through sirtuins. So sirtuins are these proteins that are associated with increased lifespan and longevity in all species as well as humans. So sirtuins are actually one of the critical regulators of the circadian rhythms as well. So they're stress adaptation genes that help to mediate the metabolism of NAD, as well as they help your body to regulate its own circadian rhythms and the circadian clocks that are working inside your body. So, for example, SIRT1, there are many sirtuin genes, quite several of them, and SIRT1 is it's thought of that SIRT1 is like a retrostat or a mediator between the circadian cues that are coming from the environment and your body's circadian clocks through one of the clock genes called clock. And also, sirtuins help to produce NAD. Although sirtuins themselves consume NAD, they help to reproduce it, so to say. So NAD is produced in like a cyclical manner. Although if some activities are consuming NAD, that same process through a salvage pathway helps to reproduce it. So it's like a recycling process where your body is able to recreate NAD, and in so doing, create energy. And calorie restriction works because of sirtuins as well, in addition to NAD, because of the same cyclical process. So in virtually all species, calorie restriction has been shown to extend lifespan and slow down aging, in addition to humans, like C. elegans, which are roundworms, mice, and yeast. They all live longer if you, quote unquote, starve them and if you feed them less calories. And the reason has to do with the same mechanism of stress adaptation. When your body feels that it's experiencing higher amounts of nutrient stress, then it's going to activate these sirtuins, which are these longevity genes that essentially start to repair broken DNA, and they start to resalvage NAD as well. So it's a quite fascinating, it's quite a paradoxical phenomenon in a sense that you're breaking down, you're experiencing starvation, but because of that, you're also helping your body to survive longer. And it's called the information theory of aging, so to say. There are many reasons why you age, but one of the core mechanisms has to do with how your body is interpreting the epigenome, and sirtuins give the epigenome the right signal of how do you stay young, and basically they stimulate some sort of a survival circuit in your body of you need to survive for longer and you need to stay longer. And inhibiting sirtuins, inhibiting circadian rhythms or disrupting them just deranges this process and accelerates aging. In addition to sirtuins, calorie restriction also works because of this thing called autophagy. There are many things that happen while you are restricted calories. You suppress insulin, you reduce mTOR signaling, and you prevent the mitochondria from breaking down, but all of those things work because of autophagy as well. So autophagy is the process of self-eating and self-catabolism, which happens also when you are calorie restricted and when you're basically starving. So during the process of autophagy, your cells begin to recycle their old and worn out components, and they're going to break those things down that are dragging you down, that are causing damage and spreading inflammation and spreading disease. Those things are broken down and they're recreated back into energy that the healthy cells can start to use. And if you, let's say, block the process of autophagy in some species, then those animals, they're not going to live longer despite eating less calories. Whereas if they have autophagy activated, then they will live longer thanks to calorie restriction. So the goal isn't as much as trying to restrict your calories and trying to starve as it is to stimulate autophagy, because the magic of calorie restriction happens from autophagy, it happens from sirtuins, and it happens from NAD. So as biohackers, we don't have to try to mimic the diet of some calorie restricted mice. We don't have to eat that. We don't have to eat like that. We would have to know how do we, optimize the processes of autophagy and optimize the processes of sirtuins and circadian rhythms and those other things. So yeah, this is a good example of how can we make this process work. And autophagy, in addition to that, has also many other health benefits, such as, like I mentioned, it recycles old and weak cell parts, reduces inflammation, has anti-aging effects, and strengthens the immune system as well. So it's not only good for longevity, but general health and vitality. But the thing with autophagy and these many other hormetic stressors is that the poison is in the dose. So too much of anything is going to be bad. Too much starvation, too much exercise, too much sauna, too much coffee, those things, they're eventually going to hit a point of diminishing returns, after which they're not causing you good, but they're actually going to be doing you harm. And the same applies to fasting and calorie restriction and autophagy. So usually most people, they still don't experience enough autophagy. They're like deficient of it. But at the same time, if you overdo it, then that's not good either. You have to find this optimal dose and optimal amount for these pathways. So how do you activate autophagy? Well, there are a few ways of doing it, such as prolonged fasting. Not eating for anything for a long time is a very potent stimulator of it, but also exercise. Exercise stimulates these same pathways, such as sirtuins and autophagy. So, that's another example of you don't necessarily have to be fasting as long as you're staying active and physically, vibrant. And of course, calorie restriction, suppressing insulin, reducing your carbohydrate intake can help. And there are also like specific autophagy boosting foods that also stimulate this process, such as coffee, herbal teas, medicinal mushrooms, those things. They're really awesome in doing that. Okay, moving on. The kind of idea that I want to end up with is that time-restricted eating has these unique metabolic benefits thanks to stimulating these pathways that I just mentioned, such as sirtuins and autophagy. And this study found that time-restricted feeding without reducing calorie intake prevents metabolic disease in mice who are fed like a junk food diet. And they took two groups of mice. One group ate throughout the entire day, throughout the entire 24-hour period, and they had much worse health outcomes and they became obese compared to those mice who are able to eat the same amount of food, the same amount of calories, but within only 8 hours. So they compressed their daily eating window within a shorter time frame. And because of that, they gained these unique metabolic benefits and they didn't get obese because of that, so to say. They were able to protect themselves against this. And another study found the same. they took 3 groups of mice. One was able to eat throughout the entire 24-hour period. The second one ate within 13 hours, and the last one ate within 3 hours, which is basically like once a day. And they found that the mice who ate with no restrictions, they didn't experience life extension, they didn't experience any disease protection, but the mice who were restricted in the time where they ate, those mice saw increased lifespan as well as improved metabolic health. And actually the group that was eating only once a day saw a much greater improvement than the one who was able to eat only within 13 hours. So it's another example that although they're eating the same amount of calories, the same amount of food, they're experiencing these unique metabolic benefits that don't happen if you're constantly in this fed state and eating throughout the entire day. And one of the scientists of that study said that increasing daily fasting times without a reduction of calories and regardless of the type of diet consumed resulted in overall improvements in health and survival in male mice. Perhaps this extended daily fasting period enables repair and maintenance mechanisms that will be absent in continuous exposure to food. So yeah, it's the activation of sirtuins, activation of autophagy that happen in the fasted state that give these mice these effects. But there's also studies in humans, the same study, like they compared the standard way of eating within 12 hours with an early time restricted feeding group where the group ate from 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. So they basically ate within only 6 hours. And they also saw a reduction in blood pressure, reduced oxidative stress, reduced insulin, and just better metabolic health compared to eating the standard way. So it does work in humans as well because we have similar mechanisms and similar patterns in our physiology. And this study was also, this is the example of how it looks like. The one group, early time restricted feeding group, ate from morning until noontime or something, and they skipped dinner, and they fasted for much longer than the other group, and they saw better health outcomes. But this study actually compared what's the difference between eating earlier and eating later if you're fasting. And they found that there were no differences as long as the hours of fasting were matched. So in the initial period of the study, one group ate from, I believe it was from like 8 a.m. to 2 p.m. or from 12 p.m. to 8 p.m. And then they did a washout period for 2 weeks where they ate normally to negate some of the adaptations. And in the last part, they swapped it out. The one who ate early in the first part then ate later in the day and vice versa. So they swapped it. And they saw that there were no differences between these groups. All of the groups who are fasting or they were confining their eating window, they saw a reduction in blood glucose, reduced insulin, and better metabolic health. But during the period that they weren't fasting, they were eating normally, then those benefits were kind of mitigated or they were not present. They didn't see these same benefits compared to the period where they were fasting. But the difference is very small, but it's still there. There is some effects that is taking place thanks to compressing the eating window. So what essentially happens is that if you're eating less frequently, then you're spending more time in this fasted state where you activate sirtuins, you also activate autophagy, you're spending more time in ketosis and burning more body fat, you're suppressing insulin. So if you're eating the standard way, for example, the average Westerner tends to eat from the moment they wake up all the way until they go to bed. So imagine they're spending the entire day within a fed state and they're never really going into like a real fasted state. Maybe they fast throughout the night, but that's not like a really long time. It's only like 8 hours, 10 hours. So they don't really ever experience, or they don't experience as much as they could, the benefits of autophagy and the sirtuins. So generally, a smaller eating window every day is going to gradually extend the time you spend in this, let's say, in the survival circuit where you stimulate these longevity genes. But in practice, there isn't going to be much difference between maybe eating once a day or maybe eating 2 times a day, as long as the daily eating window is going to be suppressed in some aspect. So this is like a pretty good example of how can you achieve this optimal balance between the autophagy as well as the growth every day. Like you just skip one meal. You don't have to, like the idea of having to eat 3 meals a day. It's pretty normal in our society. But if you look at the history of humans, then it's not normal. Like humans were used to skipping meals all the time. And that's probably one of the reasons they were able to stay healthier as well. And yeah, like in an everyday setting, just trying to spend less time in a fed state would give you like some of these unique benefits that you wouldn't otherwise get as long as the calories were to match. You're not going to be able to eat as many calories as you want, but if you were to compare the same amount of calories eaten in a smaller time frame, then you could probably see some unique effects. Next to autophagy and sirtuins, you also experience higher levels of growth hormone in a fasted state. So growth hormone is not like a muscle building hormone, but it's more of like a muscle protective hormone that you activate in a fasted state. And the body also reacts to the fasting stimulus with increasing growth hormone as to protect it against muscle catabolism and to not lose muscle. It's actually going to promote fat burning instead. And growth hormone also has anti-aging benefits. And it's pretty regular for anti-aging clinics to prescribe injectable growth hormone, but you can actually just fast and get some similar effects with growth hormone. So usually your body releases growth hormone in very small amounts throughout the day, but this study found that 24 hours of fasting essentially, quadruples the amount of growth hormone you experience within the daily window. But the majority of growth hormone gets released in sleep, so to say. So that's the time when your body is repairing itself, and that's when your body is also burning the most amount of fat in conjunction with growth hormone. So growth hormone helps to mobilize fat stores and helps to repair the body from the daily activities. So quality sleep is very important if you want to gain these benefits of growth hormone as well as the other longevity genes. So that's why it's not necessarily like a good idea to be eating immediately before bed as well. So that's why compressing it from the other end, from the evening, is also quite critical. And autophagy, like I mentioned, it also has a diurnal rhythm. Most of the autophagy gets processed in deep sleep in conjunction with the sleep hormones like melatonin and in conjunction with growth hormone. So the body consolidates all these repair processes into deep sleep because that's the most time where it has the opportunity to do so. You like sleep reduces your metabolic activities and reduces your core temperature, and that's where you can repair yourself. And melatonin, the sleep hormone, regulates these processes like autophagy and sirtuins and the circadian clocks. So if you're not sleeping well enough, or if you're disrupting your circadian rhythms because of eating too late, then you would greatly see like a reduction in the benefits of growth hormone and autophagy and melatonin because eating inhibits growth hormone and eating inhibits autophagy. So going bed, slightly hungry can lead to higher levels of autophagy and growth hormone in sleep because you're fasting. But in practice, again, that would just mean that you compress your eating window in every day in some aspects. You don't eat immediately after waking up, and you don't eat immediately before going to bed. So you consume your calories. You can eat the same amount of calories. It doesn't mean that you're gonna starve yourself. It just means that you eat them in a smaller time frame. So I'm gonna give you another reason why you shouldn't eat immediately after waking up. It's because of cortisol. Cortisol is the body's main stress hormone, and cortisol's job is to kickstart the day, basically, to give you energy and give you alertness to get out and start moving. And cortisol's circadian rhythm starts rising around 6 a.m. and it peaks around 9 a.m. And after that, it begins to drop. So in the evening, when you're sleeping, cortisol is supposed to be low because you aren't supposed to be stressed out when you're sleeping. But the problem is that if you're eating with high levels of cortisol, if you have a lot of stress, then that's gonna predispose your body to store the calories as fat more easily because you're stressed out. And cortisol is also like, cortisol helps you to mobilize fat in the morning by giving you energy. So suppressing cortisol immediately by eating is not gonna be, it's not gonna be that optimal for gaining the benefits of cortisol. Like too much cortisol is bad, but too little cortisol is also not good because you'll feel tired and you won't have the like vigor to get out and get moving. So waiting like at least like a few hours after waking up to allow cortisol to do its job and to lower down and then eating, that's like a good strategy in my opinion. And likewise, melatonin, the sleep hormone, that starts to rise in the evening after sun has set. And usually that would happen around like 8 p.m. starts to rise, peaks around 10 p.m. or something, and gradually starts to reduce in the early morning parts. So that's the time where you're not supposed to be eating because humans aren't supposed to eat at night. We're supposed to be active during the daytime and consume our calories during the daytime. And yeah, that's why you want to at least have like a few hours before going to bed where you stop eating as to allow the melatonin to start rising. And lastly, you should try to restrict the amount of snacking you do and not spend the entire day in a fed state because whenever you do eat, you raise insulin and you also inhibit the production of these longevity genes and longevity pathways like the sirtuins and autophagy. And you're never really going, if you're eating all the time, then you're never allowing your body to really repair itself and give your digestion a break, etc. So some aspects of time-restricted eating is the best bet in terms of optimizing your circadian rhythms with food and also just giving your body this boost in these longevity genes. Because it's such a simple strategy, if you think about it, like you don't have to do anything. You just adapt to it. Your body, it's not like difficult after you get used to it, so to say. It may seem like, because the society has conditioned us to be eating all the time, we become somewhat attached to eating all the time and meal timing and having snacks frequently. But that's not really natural for the human body, and it's definitely not optimal for the circadian rhythms as well. So I think I would hopefully this would give you a good motivation to practice it in some shape or form. So finally, this would be like the optimal meal timing that would fit the circadian rhythms of humans. So if we start from sleep during the night, your melatonin is supposed to be high, you're supposed to be sleeping, and that's the time you would also be fasting. For average people, that's gonna be like 6 to 8 hours. In the morning, cortisol starts rising around 5 to 7 a.m. And that's the circadian kickstart. In that moment, I would say it's not the best time to eat either. That would also like to just extend the overnight fast by at least like 4 to 8 hours. And around noon, 10 to 12 a.m., that's where your body is supposed to be the most active, and that's where your body is most insulin sensitive. That's the time where you would be able to metabolize the food the best. And that's the period of growth where you nourish yourself. And usually I would say for most people the optimal window would be like 4 to 8 hours or 4 to 10 hours, but you shouldn't try to over exceed the amount of eating from the out of fasting. Like you don't want to be spending 14 hours fed and only 10 hours fasted, because it would gravitate more towards predominantly being in a fed state. So I would always say that it's better to be the opposite way around, that you would want to spend slightly more time in a fasted state compared to a fed one. So the minimal effective dose would be like 14 hours of fasted and 10 hours of eating. And there are some other circadian researchers as well that would agree with that. So 12 hours of eating and 12 hours of fasting, that's not really fasting, or that would be like the very bare essentials of anything. And lastly, before going to bed, you would also have this period of at least 2 to 4 hours where you're not eating, as to allow your body to start producing melatonin and to prepare for sleep, to go into bed within a semi-fasted state. So yeah, that's the main message of my speech. Try to confine your eating window in some aspects and don't snack that much. So if you want to listen more about these topics, then you can find me on social media, and my website is also siimland.com. So thanks for listening.